Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Emily, and I'll be co-moderating this discussion along with Giulia. And we have an awesome discussion for you today about bot personas. So it's a very controversial topic, but we'll dive deep into the specifics of it. And we just want people to understand what a persona is, why it's important, and how to create an effective one. So I guess since we have a bit more time today, let's just do a quick round of introductions and then we'll just get into it. So Marlinda, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi. First of all, thank you for having me on this panel. My name is Marlinda, and I'm a principal conversation designer at Zendesk.
Cool. Falene?
Hi, I'm Falene. I am a jack of all trades, currently a product manager at Curiosity Robotics. And I have been in conversational AI, conversation design for about over half a decade, so about 6 years now.
So I guess that leaves me. I'm Mellini Monique. I am a complete voice nerd. I run a voice consultancy called Vocal Culture Garden, where I'm giving voice to humans and AI.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today. We're so lucky to have you, and this is going to be a fun discussion. So I guess to start, So I guess to start off, I guess my personal opinion about personas is that every experience has one, whether you realize it or not. And I just wanted to get all of your takes on that. And even if it's not like obvious, like if it's just like an app or a chatbot with just text, it still has a persona. So any thoughts?
Emily, this is Mellini. I absolutely agree. I mean, this morning, as I was thinking about this session, I was thinking everything has a personality. We as humans, I think we intrinsically ascribe personality that was maybe intended to be elicited or maybe not so. So, every bot that's out there, it's giving something. Now, how it's being interpreted is up to the individual. But my thoughts are, wouldn't it be better if we steered that interaction rather than just let somebody apply a persona that maybe it's not the best outcome that we want for our product?
I like that you use the word. Sorry, I'm just jumping in because Mellini said that word, and I see personas as a compass for the way you want to frame your basically like your North Star for how you create the dialogues and the interactions of your bot. Because I know that people are used to using the word persona as an idealized version of your target audience. So then persona for your bot then is an idealized version of an extension of your brand values and mission. So how do you frame and like get that dialogue unless you have that persona set beforehand?
So I want to jump in here because Mellini said something that I kind of somewhat don't agree with, and I feel like that's the good part of a debate. I think that Marlinda is absolutely right. Your persona for your bot, be it voice, IVR, chat, a digital human, it is a guide for your brand. You create the persona to represent your brand. But I think that there's also an aspect of if you don't create something, it will be given a persona by someone. For instance, I'll bring them up because I always do. My dog has a personality. Nobody's told me what it is. I make an assumption. Other people will also make an assumption. And in order to circumvent that, because I don't want them saying he's a princess, I tell you what he is. And so therefore it interferes with that thing that would be like, oh, he's so spoiled, he's a princess, into, he knows what he wants. And so this is where I think it's really important that you create the persona, even if the persona is not particularly, how do I say, robust. It is a certain way of talking. It comes from this perspective. These are things that it says. And you do that not only just for your internal team, but also so that whoever's using it will not create a persona themselves. If it's a banking bot and it's supposed to be an emotional, direct to the point, but also, is helpful, if you don't add it to that helpful aspect, people might think, oh, it's rude. And they might do that anyway, but you've asserted something inside of that persona that suggests helpful rather than rude. This is my perspective on it.
And Falene, maybe I wasn't clear, but what you just articulated is exactly what I was trying to articulate to the T. Maybe I wasn't clear.
Good. I thought it was a little bit different, but as long as we're on the same page, good, excellent. We need personas, and how deep do they go then becomes the question.
Absolutely. So back to you, Emily. It's really, in my mind, a matter of tone and scope. So like when we set personas for any type of bot, what's going to be the tone and what's the scope of the actual function of the bot and how that's played out?
Yeah, absolutely. Giulia, do you want to take the next question?
Yeah. I thought, first of all, I thought this was all very interesting, especially seeing how it is really true. I think there was a newsletter recently also by Jürgen Gravenstein. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say the surname. This is, but where it was saying everyone will read into it just naturally, at least non-neurodivergent people tend to read into things. So it's, if you don't code it into the thing, or like if you don't have a DNA of what you're talking to, then spontaneously you try to interpret something, most people. But yeah, I think this clarified a bit of what a persona is to us. But what I'm interested in is also, why do you think it is important to have a persona, and at what point should it be design? Should it be right at the beginning, or can you start and then get into it later?
I want to take this to start off, and because I really believe that you should come up with a persona at the beginning. And I think that you should not spend too much time on that persona. And if you go to UX school, you're going to find this anyway. They're going to say, come up with a persona for your users and then see if it's accurate. But don't spend months and months and months making that persona, because you're going to get lost in it. And I think the same is true for this bot. I think you need to kind of understand your audience. And once you understand your audience and your use, so the tone and the scope, then you can spend time putting effort into designing this persona. And you will find 100%, you will find that after having written for the bot, that maybe a different persona is kind of coming out, because some people will be too narrow. I've worked on projects where we had to come up with a character. And so the character team, where they were like, Mary Poppins, and also a nurse and a doctor and a caregiver and a doula, and their name is Joan, but they didn't actually come up with any of the phrases that this thing would say, because they spent so much time thinking about how it could solve an issue. But at the same time, you have to be very, very direct. And I'm going to quickly jump into something I wanted to share. I was reading by Erin Meyer, Getting to Si, Jia, We, Hai, and Da. It was something written in December of 2015, where it mapped cultures and their linguistic tendencies. And if you had something like this, and it does exist if you do the research, you'll see that these exist. And it said, if you're talking to somebody from this location, you have the UX user persona, it makes it so much easier to get your bot persona. So, do the UX, do your persona, find your users, and then set the tone for those specific ones. Because if you want something emotionally expressive, but avoids confrontation, you're going to say, okay, this is probably for maybe more Saudi Arabia, the Philippines, India, but it's not going to be for Israel, France, or Russia, which are much more confrontational, but still very emotive. And it's definitely not for Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands, which is much less emotionally expressive. So once you find that research, you have the UX research. Now you've created your persona very quickly and in a skeleton. And over time, you can make sure that you're constantly refining it for your brand.
I absolutely love that. Thank you for sharing that research. I saw it on your LinkedIn post and I said, ooh, what a juicy nugget that she's going to share with us. And it makes me think about, you mentioned sociolinguistics. These bots that have voice user interface, any kind of, well, not any kind of bot, but bots that are interactive with people, there is a social component. There is a component that says, hey, to Falene's example, if I'm being confrontational, that's not acceptable here. Or why isn't this bot getting right to the point? It's going all around the mulberry bush, right? And so those things we need to consider when we think about persona. But I think there's another thing that I believe we will all agree is now more than ever, we can really allow research, ethics, and design to have a nice little menage a trois, right? Like they should be together. They should be embracing each other. They should be romancing each other. And when you have the proper research and you continue to iterate and the designers are in and we're not working in silos, which Marlinda loves to talk about, like bringing all the teams together. When you do that and it comes to the persona development for the bot, it ends up being something that's not only functional, really reaches the intended use case, but it's also beautiful. It's also human-centered. It also makes people go, that was a great experience. And so I think that's the goal.
Wow. Yeah, I consider myself to be sort of a silo terminator, or at least that's my goal. Silos create inefficiencies, and efficiencies is painful for me. Gosh, I had a thought, but then I lost. Oh, actually, no. So back to Falene, you were talking about research, different conversations. I'm curious. I know I'm asking a question, but just because Falene mentioned this. So I'm curious how you approach creating dialogues, since cultures will see a different way of speaking as respectful or you know what I mean. We might think,
yes, it's like over apologizing kind of
yes,
thing. Yeah.
right. Yeah. How do you address that and design for that in your work? I'm curious.
So I mostly, for anyone who doesn't know me, I work with robots. So I have that physical aspect to deal with, and the physicality is already inside of your scope. One of the things we immediately said when working with an American audience is we need to apologize less. When we apologize, we are seen as weak. And so when we have a fallback, we need to fail forward. We need to either not end the conversation or not go into, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, but skip it. So a good example that if you take the Conversation Design Institute course they use, which is shoes, I'd like to buy a size 9 pair of shoes. If you don't quite understand size 9, then you would go into, oh, what type of shoe? And then you would circle back to the question that you missed. This is part of how we iterated designs, fail forward. But when we're coming to the aspect of how do you deal with different cultural aspects of how someone is going to approach it, one of the tactics that we use is we find a persona that is actually a person. For instance, I worked on a project where we found Vince Lombardi. And if you don't know this, he is a Green Bay Packers, or one of his careers was with the Green Bay Packers as a coach. And we found 20 different things that he would say. And we put this into our persona sheet and we said, would he say this? And then the next thing. And that way we were able to kind of keep it within a tone of somebody from the culture that we would be working with. In my current company, we make for children, and our persona for the bot is a 5-year-old child. And so we go, okay, as we write down what the kid is saying, could we see a child from America saying that? The other aspect is who are you selling it for versus who is your persona? We're selling ours to Israelis. So Israelis are very emotional, very confrontational. Including children, and not in a bad way. Not in a bad way. But when you design for it, you need to do a little bit of research, understand the general way of speech of a community, even if it is to have a in-person interview with someone from that community and say, okay, let's see how this conversation goes. And then you can kind of write that into your persona design sheet. If there's a misunderstanding, maybe you say a false word during this conversation and then they go, huh? That'll help you deal with your bot's responses. That's how we do it, or I do it specifically.
So just quickly, I wanted to plug, because you mentioned persona design sheet, I wanted to plug, there are a couple in the comments, I believe. There are some persona templates that people can use to create their persona. And I think those are so helpful to get you started, to help build it and create a foundation for the persona. Do you all typically use persona sheets, or are there any other resources that you recommend?
My sheets are not as advanced as the ones that I saw there. I actually got my template from Jason Gilbert. It's essentially a one-pager that you could print out and stick beside whatever system you're using. And it includes key lines about their personality. And then the bulk of it is, what would they say? Mm-hmm. And this helps you understand how that works.
Okay.
That's what it is.
Awesome.
I love I was going to say that much of my framework that I use for developing persona is informed by my theater background, because, in theater, you're always developing persona, story arcs, the why, the reason. You're thinking about your audience, how you want to be perceived. And then a little bit of it is also informed by my work as a therapist. Now, I'm going to tell you, I worked on inpatient psych units, both adult and adolescents. And I work with people with a multitude of emotional, behavioral, psychological issues. And so when I tell you that there is something, Falene mentioned, hey, why don't you actually create this persona based on a real person, like that's in the culture, that's actually your targeted demographic, that can solve a lot of woes. That can also make your bot ethically more on point. And if I could just give you a little quick example. A couple years ago, I noticed that anytime a voice of a Black woman was being used, whether it was a character, a commercial, it would be like this caricature of Black women, sort of like the sister girl, hey, what and I would always think, who's talking like that? Day to day, we're not talking like that. And so these frameworks that we use, they really need to consider not just the name, not just what they would say, but like ethically what's happening, culturally what's happening, the end user as well as the brand, how does that align? And so it's making me think I need to go ahead and write up a really robust framework and share it.
So we did have a comment that a template can help you help drive you to the right direction, but each context has its peculiarities. Sorry, I can't talk today. Peculiarities. So I guess if you have multiple people that you're catering to, should you create a persona sheet for each group of people, I guess?
No. Let's say you have one system. Find the person that you think represents the brand the best. Find the persona that follows through with the brand the best. And especially, and I'm going to jump into LLMs here. I know we may want to talk about it later, but with LLMs, one of the things you can do for context is to say, take on the role of a user of a system, take on a role of a Apple client and interact with the system, or come up with speeches that would respond to my questions. And that very much helps you target it down, but you can be very specific with the persona that you're coming up with. And for that, and I think that this changes kind of how we think about personas a bit. you want to pick something that is representative of the brand and what you're doing. So let's say you want to have a Black woman representing the brand and you want to have that voice and you want to have it sound that way, then stick with it. And even if it doesn't match for the rest of your audience, this is your persona. It's going to stay that way. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't match everybody. It matches the brand, and you have designed it so that it will work with everybody at some level. Like, you're not going to make them an outright Nazi, because you wouldn't do that. But you may say, listen, we're not going to do the Jewish thing. I say this as a Jew. I'm sorry. I don't want to be offensive to anyone. You don't want to maybe go into that direction because it's just too niche. And I think that in some cases it's not going to work, but in a lot of cases, if you are region specific, it will. And if you're not region specific, this may be a case to consider changing it up.
Mellini, did you have?
No, I'm in agreement. Think about a brand in general. I don't care what type of bot it is that a person is interacting with, that bot is representative of the brand, no matter what the function is. And if we think about brands in general, a brand will come out on the scene and we're like, let me see how I feel about that. But then the way the company utilizes the brand, tells the brand story, how it shows up in that ecosystem, it either reinforces a positive interaction or a negative interaction. And so it is, to Falene's point, we should not be I don't believe that a bot should be taking on all these different, personas at different times for different people. It's the brand and what the brand is trying to convey for the people, which leads to, I've seen questions before about persona, like, hey, are we going to get to the place where a company puts out a bot and the end user is able to choose the persona that it wants to have? And I want to know what you ladies think about that.
Ooh, we're actually getting a lot of comments right now.
Yeah.
I will say that when it comes to trying to address everybody, there is no one size fits all conversation. It's not like we change our personas daily just to be able to interact with people. You are who you are at your core as a human. And chatbots, even though it is a system, we still want to emulate enough of that, not human-like, but not human, right? Enough so that we can resonate with it. And we're going to hit the same issues that we have as humans communicating with each other. I like to give this example sometimes. A long time ago, when chatbots first came on the scene, people were like, well, we want to make this funny. And like, okay, give me a joke that you think 100% of your customer base is going to think funny. You won't. You're never going to serve it that way. It's just not going to happen. But yes, so back to the large language models and the hyper personalization. Let's get into it. Actually, somebody also earlier said, Sarah was also mentioned that it has the potential to manipulate people because of how you are now hyper personalizing someone who looks like me. So then maybe, I don't know, it'll have me more open to clicking, buying more, whatever it is that your company is. Personally, I don't want to live in a world where I only see people like me.
But yeah, I also think, oh, sorry.
No, I don't want to cut you off, but I want to add to that because I think it's very interesting, and it goes back to persona design, because I think that as a brand, you can have multiple personas. But one of the things that I've seen and learned through a bit of research here is that while people say they want choice, they don't. They want maybe one other choice just so they can choose the thing that you were already going to choose for them anyway. It's like when you're teaching children, the Montessori method is don't get them 12 toys, get them 2. And then they'll continue using them in more and more creative ways. So I fully agree with that. And to the point of manipulation, this has been a thing in the marketing industry for a very, very long time. And it will continue to be so. And I think that that's why you need people who do not want to manipulate. They want to create good systems, and they put in the design with an ethical eye. You want those people there, because listen, there's so many deep fakes now that you can do just about anything. With the recent launch, I believe it was Meta, and they now have actors and celebrity faces. You can get them to say a lot. And this is not new. There was a Jisoo from, I believe it's Blackpink. Yes, it is Blackpink. She had an agreement with Dior, and they created a chatbot where they would send messages of her responding to things. And that was already stepping into that realm. So I think that you're already being manipulated and marketed to. So hire people who just want to create a good product and promote your brand the best that they can inside of the chatbot. Let the marketing people do what they've been doing for years. And let's just make good products that don't lie.
Yeah.
I wanted
And
to
I think
go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, something to think about hyper-personalization that Olia here is also bringing up, and is that it can also be more in the style or the way that you propose the content, in a way that, like, just to make it more natural, maybe as a way of matching your tone, or maybe the pauses if it's voice bot, or I don't know, maybe I see that you like using emojis, and then I amp up with the emojis, something like this. But also what I'd like to bring to that reflection, and maybe ask your take on this, is that in a way, sometimes as humans, the tailoring the conversation, or like the way we interact, is more a reaction than going with the person. Sometimes it's, yes, I'll match your style. Yes, I'll match also your movements. We know in psychology this is something we tend to do with people we like. But on the other hand, sometimes it can be also, okay, now you're being really annoying. I'll try to be affirmative still, like not annoying as well, like just affirmative, but maybe show you the way out, or like show you there's a solution. So I don't know how you feel about hyper-personalization and this more, I want to say nuance, but I'm not sure that's the word. Yeah, what's your take on this?
It's an interesting kind of hodgepodge of many things going on when it comes to hyper-personalization. I do believe that we are headed in a direction where people want more representation, right? Which is going to lead to people craving hyper-personalization. But I do believe, to Marlinda's point, that we don't want to create like this effect where once again we're leading to a homogenous interaction, a homogenous society. And so the question becomes, how can we, or how do we hyper personalize without being unethical, without patronizing our end user, without being too busy as a brand, or without going across the function of the bot? And so these are all questions that really need to be thought out thoroughly, not in silos, but definitely with the design team considering the function and end use of the bot, for sure. Oh, and while there's a little dead space, I want to say that talking about, bad users, manipulation, all of these things, like Falene said, they are here. They have been here. They're not going anywhere, right? And we just need more people to be ethical, to put their voice out there. For instance, I think, like, today I'm a Black woman. I choose to be a Black woman, usually every day. But our voices, our emotional expressions, our skin tone. In many AI research, it's not prevalent. Now, I'm going to tell you, in the United States, there is a really, really bad history of research and African Americans. It's been very nefarious, bad intentions, bad outcomes. So we are at large very leery about engaging in research. And with the lack of education around AI, it compounds it. Like, what are they going to do with my voice? What are they going to do with my likeness? And these are all normal ethical questions, but it's heightened in the community. But unless we begin to participate in the research, allow our voices to be heard, our representation still won't be there, and products and devices and bots won't rightly represent or cater to who we are as a demographic. So I just wanted to put that out there, because bot persona design, if it's not correctly informed by the research, then it's still off.
So that actually brings it back to a question that Sarah asked earlier too, that I wanted to cover, is how do you sell persona design workshops or convince C-level suite people that they need a tonality guide and just a persona in general and the research to do that?
With difficulty, you either get your C-levels who immediately say, I have an idea, I know who it should be. Or you get your C-levels going, listen, I just want the brass tacks. I don't see why I need to put in the week or two it is to create this persona. And so it becomes your responsibility to step up and say, I heard you, and yes, and it's all about improvising your way through life. One of the things that we had with one of the projects that I've worked on was we had an idea what people wanted to do. And the problem with that is that it didn't match the action that the system should be taking. And the C-suite loved it. They're like, yeah, this is what we're going to do. And by C-suite, I don't just mean C-suite. I mean the managers as well. Sometimes this is a decision that happened when you weren't in the room. It might have happened before you arrived, and you arrived to a persona that is not going to fit. And so I've done it two ways. One is to walk in with a PowerPoint of this is the market research, and this is what other systems are doing, and this is who our user is, and this is the persona I think we should start developing. And that will impress some people, and it will annoy a lot of others. And the other thing to do is to, if you enter as a lead or a team, or you enter a team willing to think about it, you create a persona that you think matches. You ask them, how does this work with what you've created? And then you build it with the team and show how it actually helped, because it will improve how people work with it. And so it's less of a confrontation, sit down, bang on the table. It's more of a, you didn't ask for this, but you also didn't design it. And so you hired me as a designer. I did it. Good luck.
So then I guess my question would be, like, if the persona doesn't fit what they're trying to create, like, how do you mold that into what users are expecting? Or like, how do you shift that persona into what you want it to be?
So this is a very good question. It has happened, probably to all of us. Sometimes you have to step back and you have to say, well, maybe my research isn't convincing enough. Maybe we need to keep going down this route. And then what I have done is I've leaned into it. Great, we're going to do this. You still voice your concerns, but you edit it as much as you can to fit what they want, but also what you know you need to do ethically, morally, design-wise, because there's always wiggle room. And when there is absolutely zero wiggle room, then this becomes a red flag for the company that you're in. And maybe you need to talk to your manager about why this is so strong, because maybe they had other research that you didn't have access to. And so maybe it's a reason for you to leave.
I really
Someone else?
enjoyed that comment that said from Emiliano, we need to co-design with our stakeholders.
Mm.
That is absolutely true. And it makes me think, I was working with a small hospitality company that is all about like the alkaline lifestyle and completely plant-based. And they were trying to develop a persona that was so strong, representing their values and their mission. And I was trying to tell them, like, yeah, that's great, but your values and your mission are really niche in the audience that you're trying to go after. The people who actually need to engage, they are not there yet. So we need to sort of build a persona that can build the bridge. And to Falene's point, at first, they were not yielding. And I said, okay, let's go down this road. And so we started going down the road, but I was very practical with testing, almost bi-weekly testing about customer response, customer feedback. And eventually they were able to see, oh, our customers, they don't get it. They don't understand the tone. They don't understand even down to the word choice. They don't get it. And so from that point, we were able to calibrate. So going down the rabbit hole and then testing was so helpful to bring the C-suite or the managers or stakeholders even into alignment with what I felt as a professional persona developer it should have been. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that definitely answers, I hope that answers Divya's question about how do you incorporate the feedback from the users into the existing persona. And if anyone has anything to add to that. Okay, we can, yeah. There was another question about, sorry, one second. How does a bot match the expectations of a more confrontational user?
I can enter this one because this is fun. One of the things that you find with robots is they exist inside of someone's personal space physically. You can walk away from them, but when you come back in the room, they're still there, as opposed to a chatbot or a voice bot, which you can close the window and then you open it again and they're gone. And so with robots, we find we get a lot of confrontational users who yell, scream, throw things at the robot, turn it around. That's one of the new ones with kids now. They'll turn around a robot they don't want to see. And it's a bit difficult. I know I mentioned cultures that are a little bit more confrontational. There's two ways to look at this. Confrontational in the way that it will say, you said no, but how about? And confrontational such as, I just want to fight and I just want anyone to fight with me. Those are two different things. So I'm going to quickly address one and then go to the other. With a real life example, there was a job I applied for that had a bot. It looked like the bot was responding like it was powered by an LLM. I was at Voice and AI and I learned prompt hacking. And I was like, okay, let's try and we'll play around with this. And I got some really interesting results from this bot. This was fairly confrontational as an experience because it's basically a user trying to break the system. And with that, this is where I would say fail forward, because this is a confrontation that is not about getting angry. It's a confrontation with the how the system works. And as long as you create boundaries where the system would say, I'm not going to go forward with that. If you have a very high emotional, high confrontational user persona, not bot persona, then what you'll want to do is you'll want to have some type of go around. So you may say, and I know that we've said already, we don't like funny. I think that you can still go for something that is funny, but without being like, if you say something completely random, it's not going to make sense, but it may put someone back on track. And so it may not be traditionally funny, but because it's part of the character and how the system works, it can be conceived as funny because we don't always find people funny, but they can still tell us jokes. That's why dad jokes exist. They're not funny, but we laugh. And then the other side is a user who wants to fight. And and a user who just wants to fight and yell, and we're getting a lot of feedback that doesn't match our system, you have the option of correcting their behavior or doing nothing. And this becomes concerning because if you do nothing, then you may be losing out on an interaction. If you correct them, you may be setting yourself up for failure in the future. And this goes back to the brand persona design. What are you going to do? And if your brand says, we always want to be on track, no matter what, if they're confrontational, we'll just say, hey, back off. Or we're going to tell a joke, even if it's not a good joke. Someone yells at you to say, hey, I wish you would just turn yourself off. And then you say something that is mildly sexually funny to some people. Then it's going to put someone in a place. And they're going to be like, oh, I said something inappropriate. They said something inappropriate. Maybe I need to get back online. But if your company says, if they're not talking about what they're supposed to be talking about, it's okay. They'll come back. And you can say nothing. Or fail forward to a different thing. But one of the things I found is that with robots, at least, saying I do not understand makes confrontation worse. That's it.
Yeah, we can definitely see that from, I don't know, maybe our own experiences with so many bots saying, I do not understand. And you're just like, please just say anything else. Give me a clue. I don't know. And I think what you said kind of also gets to the point of Matt here of, does it matter if 100% of users don't find the bot funny or personally match the user? I mean, this is a sort of other thought, which is related in a way, but sometimes, you know, you have to be confident with the choices you make for the persona. So sometimes you have to decide, this is how it makes sense. This is what will make the character or the persona well-rounded. And it doesn't matter if at that point someone will not find it funny or will only take it as a warning or will only take it as a, okay, I'm gonna overlook that. They can also overlook things. But I don't know, I'm curious about this as well. Do you feel like it has to be likable? Like that's the main goal of a persona, or can it also be, you know, something more to your design choice as well?
I think it's a brand choice. There is a cafe somewhere in the United States that their entire brand is swearing at you and hitting you and being the worst waiters in the world. And people love it because it's a brand choice. And you're right. They are confident about it. They are, this is what we do and this is how we talk about it. And so people know what to expect going forward. And if you create that expectation, you create the secondary world where that's the truth. I make that noise because I talk about this a lot and I love it. But you create that system where it's true, keep it, do not lose it. It's the same as if you make a empathetic bot. We know that bots can't be empathetic, but you've decided to make it that way. It's emotionally available. Then you can never break that. You can never say, in order for us to be more clear with each other, I'm just going to be like, listen, I'm a robot. I don't feel anything. So ask me a different way. You can't do that. So you're right. Be confident, keep with it. If people don't like it, they'll get over it, because I don't know about you. I have called a lot of people who I don't like, and I still keep the conversation because the goal is necessary.
I couldn't agree more. When you take a definite, certain stance as a brand, it is better than being all over the place because you break the belief system, you water your brand down. People don't know what to expect. And I think that's more dangerous. Like not knowing what to expect is more dangerous than just not liking a bot that serves you well. You'll get over it. Mm-hmm.
I have a little, whenever I hear conversations of like wanting to address confrontations in a chat bot, I'm like, what's the volume though? in comparison to how much of the other conversations that you're getting. I get that we want to be able to serve that. I guess in my mind, I'm like, okay, we want personas, we want to build intents, we're trying to scale this in a team. What comes first? So this also goes back to how much is too much. Like, how far are we going into designing this, and how deep are we getting? If only 3 users out of thousands are like being, well, that's unrealistic. But you know what I mean? Like, looking at the numbers and prioritizing that too, I would question, like, what is the purpose of dealing with this in this way?
So it's an interesting one that I've also heard as well, that the majority of the work of a conversational AI designer or a VUX designer, or however you're going to write your job title, the majority of it is writing fail cases, fail and repairs, because the actual happy path is easy. But you're right. There is a point where you just say, this is a global response. If it does not exist within the realm of this product, especially if you're using something like an LLM for language understanding, you say, listen, you have our knowledge base, use RAG, get the information. If it exists outside of that, here are 12 set types of responses. This is all that you use. If they're going beyond it, stop. If they continuously go beyond it, send them to a human agent. I work with robots, can't send them to a human agent, but you can still do that for other systems.
Yes.
So we had a question. I guess I'll kind of lump two of them into the same thing. So one of them was, what are your thoughts on sprinkling some quirks and flaws into your personas to make bots more relatable? Actually, let's start with that one first, and then I'll get to the other one.
I say do it. I say do it, but don't overdo it. And there is a good line, but consider us as the panelists. We all have our own persona. We all bring it here. You can see it in the visualization of where we're sitting, how we're dressed, what we're trying to promote. And we all have our little tiny quirks. If you overplay the quirk, it becomes annoying. So think about when you're going through it, how much would this be annoying to you? And I would say maybe limit it to certain types of responses. Maybe only your happy path is quirky and everything else is not. Everything else is like, get back on track. But I think that you should do it. And I know that that microcopy, the industry now is be efficient, be direct, don't do the quirks because they're overwhelming. But this is about communicating with humans in the manner in which humans communicate. And we are quirky. And you don't need to say or but you may want to have it so that anytime you say a certain word, it becomes a pun. And if the system gets a chance, it will say the pun. It's dumb. It may not fit in your brand, but if it does, and that's the way you want to go, that's the quirk you want to show, amazing. Or if your brand says, hey, listen, we're about llamas. Our title name is Llama Drama. And that is the project name. So then maybe when you're doing mathematical equations, you say, well, if you have 2 llamas and 3 llamas, and you give each of them 17 bananas, how many llamas have bananas? And this would be a fun, quirky way to promote it that still makes sense with your brand and is relatable without overdoing it too much.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that it definitely goes back to the brand and how much they want to lean into the peculiarities of their brand through the bot, while, to Falene's point, not just overdoing it. And each brand has to find that balance. What would be overdoing it? How can we show these quirks or even negative responses in a way that continues the function of the bot for the end user? And there is a brand, I've personally been to that. Maybe we might be talking about the same brand, Falene, where there's a restaurant chain and they are meant to be rude, meant to be obnoxious, and guess what? When I tell you they leaned in, they did not break character even with the children at the table, right? And if I've been several times, taking different people. And if I went on a day where a particular employee was not leaning in, it broke the world of, belief for me. And I thought, this is not good. This is not good. So as quirky as that place is, I was relishing in it when it was leaning all the way in and serving me the way I expected it to, versus when it was kind of halfway. I'll be a little whimsical, a little quirky, but not really, like, no. So the brand has to really determine how much, how little, how far.
For custom use cases, oh, sorry. I was just going to say.
No, I was just going to say, I'd like to hear from Marlinda what she thinks about customer care. So there you go.
Yeah. Okay, here. Yeah, jumping right in. For customer support use cases, especially when it's just in chat, when you guys are hearing, interacting with a chatbot, there is no voice. What voice do you hear? Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm very sensitive to that. There are voices in my head all the time based on what I'm reading. So even without a literal voice, there is a tone of writing. It comes with the word choice. It comes with how concise or how, long the passage is. It comes in the way it answers your questions. It comes in the way maybe something quirky or whimsical might be typed out. So the word choice and the length definitely, and even the prosody of the writing, the flow of the writing, it provokes a voice in my head. And so voice is always happening.
So I'll add to that. I'm not someone who typically thinks in sound. I think in pictures. And so when I think it doesn't sound like a person, it looks like something talking. And that for me is often related to the platform that it's sitting on. So for instance, if you go to Home Depot and they have their chatbot on, the colors you see are orange and white and black and some gray. That starts to affect the kind of tone and voice and what I expect from it. I expect it to be a little bit funny, but also very efficient. If you go to the Airbnb one, their chat section is basically black and white. And so I expect it to be very sort of boring, bored person who's sitting there typing. What's funny about Airbnb, though, is that they actually put a lot of quirk into their chatbot, which is really interesting because it completely contrasts with the minimalism of the design of the website where the chatbot is sitting. And I think that you need to consider where it sits as well. With voice, you consider the voice and how it sounds. You consider the length of the menu you have to go on an IVR call. But I think with chatbot, you consider where it sits.
I think brands, again, it's like, this is such a catch-all answer. It depends on the brand. Being that I've worked a lot in the CRM space, like, I don't know if our customers care about quirkiness. Most of the time that they're interacting with the chatbot is because something is wrong. So fix that, get in and get out. Just a friendly, neutral chatbot, and that's good enough for the most part. Add in a bit of terminology from your brand, and that's it.
So I'll throw something out just real quick as a one-liner. If your actual tier 1, tier 2 support would not say the thing, do not have your chatbot say it. If it is not the situation to be funny, don't be funny. If your tier 1 or tier 2 are instructed, though, to be a bit more, personable, relatable, funny, tell a personal story, then your chatbot should also have something of that so that it's not a break in the experience when you're transferred to a person.
Yeah, and there's a comment from a LinkedIn user that's kind of hitting on this, and it's saying that, like, hey, a lot of people at these companies, they've been educated to act a certain way via chat, but that's really only 10% of the human experience. But some of those powerful experiences are when the human breaks the script and, hey, how's your morning? Oh, it's sunny there, and things like that. And I agree with the power of LLM. I do believe that even if it's not an LLM, those type of interactions can be written into the flow, especially if it's on brand and in the flow of what a normal agent, speaking of like a CRM, a normal agent would say. Like now, whenever I'm dealing with customer service chatbots, they'll say things like, I hope something nice, something that's just pleasant. It has nothing to do with the experience, but it's like a nicety. And I'm one who likes niceties. So that works for me. Whereas somebody else could just think, cut to the chase, get with it. So the design for me, those choices always go back to the brand. But let me also say this, digital humans. This is where I get so excited. And this is where I believe more of that human-centered design, more of that emotion-driven, interactions can happen, especially when they're like based on LLMs and things like, and generative AI. You see them, they're embodied personalities. They have a look, they have a voice that you actually hear. They're acting with you, whether they're there to be a social bot, a well-being bot. These persona development for these types of beings, I think, necessitates a deeper arc of development. They necessitate a more robust look at what is the scope of what we're going to talk about and do, and what I'm going to, how I'm going to respond to your questions. And there's a company called Being AI. I had the pleasure of talking with the founder, Jeannie Lim. They're out of China, and she develops bots that the goal is for friendship. And I know some people are like, a friend, a bot as a friend, but friendship, entertainment, learning experiences, and adventure. And they expect their bots to grow with the user. Okay. So can you imagine these digital humans are still just bots. They still need programming. And so well, they're working on generative and things like that, so it helps. But can you imagine the level of thought and design that you have to take time and consider while staying on brand, while considering the research, while considering ethics and the end user? It excites me deeply. And that's where I love to really work.
So I want to jump in on that because I love the conversation of digital humans, because this is how I think about it. Mm-hmm. IVR, great. That's this general system we're used to. Then chatbots are the written embodiment of IVR, and voice bots are the verbal embodiment of chatbots, and digital humans are the visual embodiment of voice bots, and robots are the physical embodiment of all of that. And digital humans are, I think, really going to blow up because they are so interesting. They do have a very strong ethical conundrum, though. With the beginning, we talked about manipulation, and there's nothing more manipulative than a person. No offense to all of us. We all know you put on a mask, you walk into a room, you do your very best to convince them that you're a thing, and then you walk out, you take it off, and you go home and cry. Or you don't. You go out and you have ice cream and you're good. But this is something to consider. It is more difficult to manage. And I think that generative AI makes it even more difficult to manage. I think that this is one of the reasons why we have so much invested in prompt engineering, because we want to limit, we want to create boundaries. Because once all the classical examples are when Twitter announced their bot, let it loose on Twitter, and within a couple hours, it became this anti-Semitic creature who just hated Jews. It's terrible. It's horrible to watch. They did the same on Facebook when it was still Facebook. And also, same thing, couple of hours, horribly racist. So we're always considering that. But I think with the digital human aspect, this becomes more and more concerning and more difficult to manage. So it becomes a lot harder for us to talk about personas as being an actual thing we can do. The whole topic of this is how far is too far. And when you get into digital humans, that is a very quick line you cross, because professional should be the base of your persona. And once you start getting into friendliness, which I think we need to do, because there's a lot of us who we don't want to talk to people 100% of the time. They're exhausting, but we still need to tell someone our story on repeat. And if you're autistic, a friend that just listens to you constantly and teaches you how to use your face and can work with you, and so you get out your need to continuously talk about one thing, fabulous. But we need to also consider how easy it is for people to manipulate people. And once our voice bots have a face, they become manipulators. Not in necessarily a bad way, but that's essentially what they are.
So sorry, we're at the hour mark, so I just want to make sure we're all good on time. Do you have a couple minutes to continue, or?
I do. I have about 10 more minutes that I could give.
Okay. Okay, awesome. So yeah, do you want to finish your thought, and then we'll just ask one more question, and then I think we'll continue the conversation at some point.
So I think that as designers of persona, we really need to, as an industry, grapple with manipulation. What are the pros of manipulation and what are the cons of manipulation? Because you do have both pros and cons. And I guess the best we can do is to systematically and ethically mitigate the risk of those cons when it comes to manipulation, because all advertising and marketing could be deemed manipulation. When I work with humans, helping them learn to use their voice in a really productive way, many people think that's manipulation, right? And so I think as designers, we really need to hunker down and say, okay, pros, cons, how can we mitigate the cons, right? And then lastly, Falene mentioned bots that I forgot exactly what it was, but I want to point to bots used in social care. So for instance, you talked about autism, but what about the conundrum between when we're creating bots, social bots, digital humans that are there to be social companions for people? One part of the camp says that is completely unethical. It is ruining the social fabric of humanity. But then the other end of the camp is saying, if the fabric of humanity wasn't already ruined, maybe there wouldn't be a need for social bots. And so we don't have the answers today about what's too far, but I believe we're going to find out. I believe we're going to find out because it's not going anywhere.
Absolutely agree. So I think I just wanted to hit on one last question from Richard. And the question is, sorry if this was addressed earlier, but isn't creating personas a design decision? Doesn't introducing personas confuse users into thinking these bots are like humans, some sort of new entity to interact with? What if we design persona-free conversational tools, which are natural but not human-like? Some of the best tools I use, tape measures, phones, etc., have a character to them, but don't have some sort of complex persona. By not giving these things personas, we correctly portray them as tools to use, which gives the user a much better mental model on how to use them. And I think we've covered a lot of this already, but I just wanted to see if you had anything else to add to this.
I do. And especially because you talk about tools, things that exist in our physical realm that you can work with. Robots. So I have a lot of thoughts. You have now entered a field where you are talking in the way that humans talk. You are communicating in the way that humans communicate. A tape measure does not. You're talking about something where the learning curve to entry is exceptionally low. It's, can I talk to this thing? And we've moved out of the realm of chat. So now you don't even need to know how to write. You just need to know that you have a problem and you need to be able to speak. And when we get into the realm of digital humans, you don't even need to hear. You can follow lip movements. You don't necessarily need to speak as well. We already are starting to see technologies develop where You can sign at a camera and it will write down what you're signing. The more we go forward into this, the next phases, we see more accessibility. So, but not just accessibility in that, yes, it can be used, accessibility in that it can be used with very little education and full regular human communication. Once you start talking like a human, you are acting like a human. Anything that is without designed persona will get a persona, but you won't be the one driving it, and you won't be able to keep it consistent, because anything that you write has your personality meshed into it if you are writing enough. And most chatbots are writing enough for somebody to gain some type of insight into what it's doing. Even just straightforward, efficient chatbots. And it goes into a stereotype, but ones that are direct to the point, minimal speech, you can go and say, that sounds German to me. It's a stereotype, but it's one that will be gotten because you didn't design something that says otherwise.
Does anyone else have any thoughts?
That was perfectly stated. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Any other final thoughts from anyone before we close out?
I just want to encourage everybody to not be on the defense when it comes to the possibilities for persona development and persona design within the world of bots. It's so much to explore, and we do have to be grounded and look at the worst use cases, but we also have so much area to think about how these bot personas can be developed for accessibility, ethics, personalization, laser focused function for the brands, and ultimately how they can be used not only in commercialization, but in social and well-being and healthcare settings. So see the possibilities.
My last thought is just that now more than ever, ethics needs to be baked right in the beginning of how you think about building an interaction.
And
Absolutely.
I'll just add to one thing with that. The industry has changed. You can't still be doing the thing that you were doing last year. It's not going to work. I talk about secondary world belief and secondary world design, how it's supposed to relate to the primary world, how we interact with that. That has changed. The base assumptions that you have going in are no longer the same. You don't have to educate the market. And because you don't have to educate the market in certain things, those are already in the primary world, not the secondary world. You show somebody a robot and it expects to be able to talk to it. And this is something we're seeing in children as young as 2 years old and people as old as 90. And we also see people going onto websites and they see that chat with us box and they're expecting to have some type of instant interaction. And when the interaction is delayed because it's going to a person and not a bot, this is confusing. The industry is not the same. What we need to do is not the same as what it was last year. And because of that, thank you for coming and learning about how we're doing things now.
Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. I guess stay tuned for other panel discussions, and I hope we can continue this discussion at some point or in some form or another.
This discussion is 2 hours, honestly.
Oh, I know. We could. I have so many more questions, but we'll definitely try to continue this some other way. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
More persona.